It's all quiet in the underground bunker. Doors closed, locks bolted. But the Great One isn't just resting on his laurels. He's making sure your weekend is even better by giving you his best. This is the best of Mark Levin.
My goodness. A lot has happened in the last 48, 72 hours, and we're going to cover it all right here, only as we can. We're going to start with the assassination attempt on the president. We're going to talk about the selection of J.D. Vance and a massive decision in Florida that I'm very proud of because our people at Landmark Legal Foundation played a very significant role in that. I do want to say up front, a lot of people on radio and TV are commenting on what's taking place in Milwaukee and on politics, and it's very, very important that they do. We want to hear from everybody. In 1976, as a young Turk, I campaigned for Ronald Reagan in Pennsylvania, and the Republican establishment said he can't win. He can't win. And they backed Gerald Ford. 1980, I campaigned for Ronald Reagan again. The Republican establishment in Pennsylvania said he can't win. They got behind George H.W. Bush. They were wrong on both accounts. Sometimes you have Republican candidates for president who are so powerful in and of their own personalities, their charisma, their positions, and so forth. It doesn't matter who they pick. That's Donald Trump. It didn't matter who Ronald Reagan picked. He was told, pick George H.W. Bush, unite the party. He didn't need to, but he did. And he won in two massive landslides having absolutely nothing to do with George H.W. Bush. And Donald Trump is poised to win bigly, assuming you and I and everybody we know get out and push hard. And it didn't matter and wouldn't matter who his pick was. Now, already they're trashing J.D. Vance. He was a never-Trumper. They point to 2016. Ladies and gentlemen, 2016 was a brutal primary. Ted Cruz, who I had supported, others had supported. But then the primary's over, and you support the nominee, in this case, Donald Trump, who has become a dear friend of mine, and vice versa. Just as Donald Trump early on in his career was a Democrat, fairly liberal, then he was part of the Reform Party, and then he became a Republican. Or Ronald Reagan, who was a New Deal Democrat, said the party left him and became the most conservative Republican president in history. And we can go on and on about our own family members and so forth and so on. So the media try and create the impression that, oh, look at this, J.D. Vance is a hypocrite. You know what's funny? Notice they never talk about Kamala Harris in that 2016 debate where she ripped the skin off of Biden on his racism. And he picked her. They don't bring that up. They're bringing up J.D. Vance's age. He's 39 years old. Only 2 years in the Senate. When Barack Obama ran for president, wasn't chosen as a vice president, he had 2 years in the Senate, a failed candidacy for the House of Representatives, a few years in the state Senate in Illinois, and before that he was basically a community rabble-rouser, an Alinskyite. He had no resume, nothing. Once again, the media, even some in our media, ignore them. Use your own head. I'm not a politician. I'm not part of the Trump campaign. I call things as I see them. We've had at least 8 years of a coordinated, systematic effort to dehumanize Donald Trump by the Democrat Party and their media and academia. day after day. And all throughout, I've been on the radio, and I've commented on it, and I've denounced it. We even reminded around here a few weeks ago, I even said about Joy Reid and her constant references to Hitler and Trump that I fear for Donald Trump. I worry about his well-being. And it's not the first time I said it. Now, there's not a direct corollary, not yet, between one and the other. But when it becomes part of the common vernacular, the common discussion, in a media that is 95, 98% Democrat Party surrogates, it becomes part of the media culture. It becomes a truism. This kind of fear-mongering and scaremongering, it has an impact on the psyche of a lot of people. I think I've led the effort here saying stop calling Trump Hitler. Stop saying he's going to imprison his political opponents. Stop saying he's going to have people executed. Stop saying he's going to destroy democracy. I've called out the individual reporters at CNN and MSNBC, on the New York Times and the Washington Post payroll. I'm calling them out all the time. The things that they say. And so I'm supposed to sit here, my first opportunity to speak to you since Saturday in the assassination attempt. Oh, my God. 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters, and Donald Trump would have been shot in the back of the right side of his skull and dead right there and then. How horrific that he turned his head, calling for his graphic. And yes, that's divine intervention. That's Hashem. That's God. Just imagine that. Terrible. Sickening. And we'll get into this. To watch Joe Biden yesterday give his speech about unity was pathetic. Why was it pathetic? For several reasons. Joe Biden has spent an entire career, 50 years in Washington, D.C., destroying people's characters and smearing them. Whether it's Clarence Thomas or Sam Alito or Bob Bork, whether it was Ronald Reagan, Donald Trump, he's a very hateful, nasty individual. Early in his career, siding with the racists and the segregationists because he thought it was an opportunity for him. The things he said about jungles and interracial public schools are horrendous. Even since then, he's said many racist things. The media have given him a pass. Media have protected him. He didn't, during the course of that speech, ever take any responsibility as the leader of the nation and the Democrat Party for any of it. When the day before President Trump was shot, he reportedly told donors to put a bullseye on him. Obviously, he didn't mean to kill him or to have him assassinated, but when you use this kind of rhetoric, and when you give a speech like you did at Independence Hall a few years back, horrendous, with all the lighting and so forth, and when your campaign is focused almost exclusively that Donald Trump will destroy our democracy, that Donald Trump is a racist, when your surrogates are calling him Hitler repeatedly in the media, on MSNBC and CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, giving voice to these people, giving them platforms? The effort to dehumanize Donald Trump, as I've said now for years, to dehumanize him, was a strategic effort by the media, the Democrat Party, and their very choice of guests to comment on it, to dehumanize him, to dehumanize the tens of millions of people who support him. Hillary Clinton, it's been constant. Bernie Sanders, it's been constant. AOC, the list is infinite. But the number one person on that list is Joe Biden, who took no responsibility and didn't apologize. Instead, he lectures the nation. This is a very violent Democrat Party. We've talked about it here. Very violent. 2020. As that was going on, Democrats in the media, Democrats in the Democrat Party were either defending or downplaying what was taking place in our streets. The riots, the arson, the assaults. The entire Black Lives Matter movement, the Antifa movement, the smearing of police officers, local police in particular, rampant crime in our streets, violence everywhere. Since October 7th of last year, the virulent, Jew hatred, attacks on Jews, physical attacks on synagogues, on Hillels, on young kids wearing yarmulkes or Star David, or with Jewish names. Precious little was said by the Democrat Party leadership, just enough to get by. And the same with the Biden administration. Slow to act, if they acted at all, with all the means they had provided by the Trump administration, prior administrations on hate crimes and so forth, the ability to deport people who are here on student visas, nothing. The ability to use the bully pulpit to condemn these universities and colleges, virtual silence. The relentless attack, vicious attack on Benjamin Netanyahu, just like against Trump. Just like against Bork, just like against Thomas, just like against Alito. It's a tactic. Target and character assassinate. That was Saul Alinsky. That was Vladimir Lenin. We know this is what was taking place. We talked about it as it was taking place. The fact of the matter is, no, we can't tie anything specifically to this 20-year-old murderer who murdered a wonderful patriot who was protecting his family. He was shot in the head. And the other two Trump supporters who are in critical condition, of which we know very little, the President of the United States, by the blink of an eyelash, almost was executed in front of the whole world.
Mark Levin.
Making your weekend even better. This is the best of Mark Levin.
You know, Butler is a tiny town in Pennsylvania. It's got a population of about 6,000. I don't know how big its police force is, but I'm sure it's quite small, Mr. Producer. How many can they have? 12? 20? The idea, as Joe Biden would say, the idea, no joke, that the United States Secret Service, with all its resources, all its experience, would be relying on a small-town police force of loyal, patriotic men and women, no doubt, to protect the perimeter, that is, the area outside an encircled area, to protect the president, is so outrageous to me. And they are leaking like hell on these cops. Does that mean a cop who saw the perp shouldn't have shot him on sight? No, it doesn't forgive, it doesn't forget. My point is different. The Secret Service should have been on top of that building. Secret Service drone or drones should have been in the air. The Secret Service, any building where a possible sniper can climb to the top, should have been secured by the Secret Service. Not a police department in a town of 6,000 people. I just don't get it. And now it even becomes more perplexing. You know, I get people who say to me all the time, why do you talk about Iran all the time and Israel all the time? Why? Why? Here's a headline from CNN. Secret Service ramped up security after receiving intel of Iranian plot to assassinate Trump. No known connection to shooting. The Islamo-Nazi regime in Tehran wants to assassinate Donald Trump. It wants to assassinate Mike Pompeo. It wants to assassinate John Bolton. Now, he's a reprobate, but still, assassinate John Bolton? They want to assassinate Americans? That's crazy. They're the enemy. They're evil. So Bolton has special protection. Pompeo has special protection. Trump's supposed to have special protection. We are funding Iran to the tune of billions of dollars. Joe Biden gives Netanyahu the Trump treatment in terms of his yelling and horrendous statements about Israel, the blood libels against Netanyahu. He says nothing about the leadership of Iran. Why are we giving them billions of dollars? Why did we lift the sanctions on oil? U.S. authorities obtained intelligence from a human source in recent weeks on a plot by Iran to try to assassinate Donald Trump. You do understand, right? That's a declaration of war. A development that led to the Secret Service increasing security around the former president in recent weeks. Multiple people briefed on the matter told CNN. That's frightening. So they increased Secret Service around the president, and this still happened? President Trump? The existence of the intelligent threat from a hostile foreign intelligence agency and the enhanced security for Trump raises new questions about the security lapses, and it goes on. But it not only raises questions about the security lapses, which definitely need to be addressed and now, but nowhere in this article. Well, let's go on. Let's go on. National Security Council spokesperson Adrian Watson, said there's no known link between the shooter, the permanent mission of the Islamic Republic of Iran to the United Nations denied there's an Iranian plot to assassinate Trump. Oh, wow. Must be true then. These accusations are unsubstantiated and malicious. From the perspective of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Trump is a criminal who must be prosecuted and punished in a court of law. For ordering the assassination of General Soleimani, Iran has chosen a legal path to bring him to justice. Iran never chooses a legal path. Surge of threats from Iranian state-backed media. Iran has repeatedly vowed revenge for the U.S. military's killing of Qasem Soleimani, the commander of the Iranian military's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The former senior Trump administration officials who worked on national security have had tight security since leaving the government. We're having to protect Pompeo, Bolton, others who worked at the National Security Council because Iran's threatening to assassinate them and threatening to assassinate President Trump. This is a big story. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was also a target of the Iranian assassination plot. According to a federal law enforcement source familiar with the investigation, Trump's former national security advisor, Robert O'Brien, had a U.S. government security detail due to threats from Iran, like Pompeo and other former Trump officials. That detail was dropped last summer, according to sources familiar with the matter. O'Brien is now paying for his own private... So Biden drops the security protection for O'Brien, who is still threatened by the Iranians by possible assassination. Biden wouldn't give RFK Secret Service protection until the day after President Trump was shot. Bolton still has Secret Service detail, and he should. For months, law enforcement officials have been concerned about the persistent threat of Iran potentially attempting to assassinate former Trump officials and the former president himself, according to multiple sources familiar with the matter. This is CNN. But the recent intelligence suggested a significant uptick in the threat, the sources told CNN, because they don't want him to win. Because they know that Biden and Blinken are appeasers. They don't want Trump back in. Warnings about the operational planning have coincided with a noticeable surge of online messaging from Iranian accounts and state-backed media mentioning Trump, which has raised security concerns among U.S. officials, one of the sources told CNN. Now, presumably, this information is in the hands of Joe Biden and Blinken themselves. So what are they doing to Iran about it? What are they doing? What are they doing? They're attacking Israel. They're undermining Israel. They're withholding arms from Israel. Israel says 60% of its tanks have been badly damaged. Did you hear that, Mr. Producer? They're low on ammunition. Iran is, feeling its oats. It feels it can do whatever the hell it wants. Hezbollah today fired hundreds of missiles on Israel. Today, the Israelis uncovered enormous amounts of weapons in the East Bank. Well, they can call it the West Bank of Jordan. I'll call it the East Bank of Israel, okay? In the East Bank, this guy Biden, he's got to go. I'm rooting for the Democrats who are trying to dump this guy. But then there's this. Who is this woman in charge of the Secret Service? Kim Cheadle. Well, our friends at the New York Post have told us. What a great newspaper. Secret Service Director Kim Cheadle landed job after pushed by Jill Biden's office. Sources say, I have told you that she is the Edith First Lady Wilson. She's running the show, along with the Obama revolutionaries, Marxists, and Islamists. Embattled Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle, who's facing congressional outcry and calls to resign over security lapses leading to former President Donald Trump's near assassination Saturday, landed her role thanks largely to a close relationship with the First Lady, Jill Biden. The Post has learned. Jill Biden. Cheadle, 53, is the second woman to lead the Presidential Protection Agency and secured the non-Senate confirmed role in August 2022 after a 3-year stint as a senior director of global security at PepsiCo. Before that, she had 27 years in the Secret Service, beginning in the Clinton administration. Four sources close to President Biden's family, including people who interacted with Cheadle during the Obama-Biden administration, said she was well-liked by the future First Lady and her most senior aides, including top advisor Anthony Bernal. Quote, Cheadle served on Dr. Biden's... what's this Dr. Biden crap? Cheadle served on Dr. Biden's second lady detail, and Anthony pushed for her, a Democratic insider told the Post. Anthony has no national security or law enforcement experience. He should have no influence over the selection of the U.S. Secret Service director. I heard at the time she was being considered for director that Anthony had pushed her forward as an option, another well-placed source told the Post. Anthony Bernal, top advisor to the First Lady. Bernal, 51, is widely regarded as rivaling even White House Chief of Staff Jeff Zients in terms of influence over administration decisions. Yes, because Jill Biden is acting as president. He has faced allegations of bullying and sexual harassment from colleagues who have likened his sway to that of Russian mystic Rasputin over the Romanov court. Anthony is obsessed with being DEI compliant, a third source told the Post, using the acronym for diversity, equity, and inclusion, the human resources practices of attempting to ensure diversity in the workforce. Cheadle is expected to provide a briefing to members of Congress Tuesday on how gunman Thomas Matthew Crooks was able to... well, you get the point.
Mark Levin.
You're listening to the best of Mark Levin.
I want to read something to you because you're going to be hearing about this for the next several days, and the media will be pushing it. Joe Biden's war on the Supreme Court. Now, I probably wrote one of the most popular books on the Supreme Court. Men in Black was my first book many years ago. I was extremely critical of the court, the authority that it took, and I recommended in that book that we have term limits for Supreme Court justices. And then I remembered in the Liberty Amendments, which had some number of suggestions, in Chapter 4, an amendment to establish term limits for Supreme Court justices and supermajority and legislative override. I want to read just my proposal to you as the foundational point from which to address what Biden is about to do. Section 1. No person may serve as Chief Justice or Associate Justice of the Supreme Court for more than a combined total of 12 years. Section 2. Immediately upon ratification of this amendment, Congress will organize the justices of the Supreme Court as equally as possible into 3 classes, with the justices assigned to each class in reverse seniority order, with the most senior justices in the earliest classes. The terms of office for justices in the first class will expire at the end of the 4th year following the ratification of the amendment. The terms for the justices of the second class will expire at the end of the 8th year, and of the third class, the end of the 12th year, so that 1/3 of the justices may be chosen every 4th year. Section 3. When a vacancy occurs in the Supreme Court, the President shall nominate a new justice who, with the approval of the majority of the Senate, shall serve the remainder of the unexpired term. Justices who fill a vacancy for longer than half of an unexpired term may not be renominated to a full term. Section 4. This is important. Upon 3/5 vote of the House of Representatives and the Senate, Congress may override a majority opinion rendered by the Supreme Court. 3/4. Very difficult to get. Section 5. The congressional override under Section 4 is not subject to presidential veto and shall not be the subject of litigation or review in any federal or state court. Section 6. Upon 3/5 vote, this is the most important part. Upon 3/5 vote of the several state legislatures, the states may override a majority opinion rendered by the Supreme Court. 3/5. 30 states. 30 state legislatures. Section 7, the states override under Section 6 shall not be the subject of litigation or review in any federal or state court or oversight or interference by Congress or the President. Section 8, congressional or state override authority under Sections 4 and 6 must be exercised no later than 24 months from the date of the Supreme Court rendering its majority opinion, after which date Congress and the states are prohibited from exercising their override. Now, why? Every one of those words, sentences, sections were very, very carefully thought about, rationalized, and reasoned. My view is that the Supreme Court has review authority that the founders, certainly the framers, never contemplated. Judicial review is not in the Constitution. It's an implied power. It's a necessary power. But when you look at the activist Supreme Courts, the Warren Court in particular, and you look at how the court gets involved in virtually any issue it wants to, that's problematic. Now, you'll notice I talked about the need to amend the Constitution. These are called the Liberty Amendments. And I talk about the Convention of the States under Article 5. Now, I want to read to you something that Joe Biden is about to propose. And by the way, subsequent to my writing Men in Black and the Liberty Amendments, the left has come out with their own version of term limits for Supreme Court justices, which have a completely different purpose. Their goal is to pack the court. To pack the court. You'll notice I have moving terms to set it up and so forth. And this is from the Washington Compost. President Biden is finalizing plans to endorse major changes to the Supreme Court in the coming weeks, including proposals for legislation to establish term limits for the justices, an enforceable ethics code, according to two people briefed on the plan. So this is a leak now, right there. Legislation? These are co-equal branches. Congress doesn't have the power to legislate term limits for the Supreme Court. The justices of the Supreme Court serve on the court for good behavior. It's a lifetime appointment. Just listen to me very carefully, because the others are going to try and catch up, and I need you to be out front on this. What Biden and his people are saying is that they have the power through legislation to change the makeup of the terms, to take it from good behavior, which is a lifetime appointment as long as it's good behavior, to term limits. You'll notice my book's called The Liberty Amendments, the amendments to the Constitution. They have no intention of seeking amendments to the Constitution. Moreover, you'll also notice I insisted when I wrote my amendment that the state legislatures have a role, 3/5 of the state legislatures, not the governments of the state, not the governors, not the judges, the legislature, have the power to override a Supreme Court decision. So the entire body politic can be involved. Some people have said elect the justices. That's crazy. You have unalienable rights. People don't get to elect somebody who will seize your unalienable rights. But that's for another day. Here's my point. He's also weighing whether to call for a constitutional amendment to eliminate broad immunity for presidents and other constitutional office holders. What Joe Biden is proposing is the destruction of separation of powers. These are not reforms. These are not improvements. He wants to use the power of Congress, which doesn't have the power, to change the terms of Supreme Court justices. If Congress has the power to do such things, then the Supreme Court will forever be intimidated and threatened and subjected to legislation of all kinds. They want to impose enforceable ethics codes on the Supreme Court. Can the Supreme Court impose ethic codes on Joe Biden? No. Congress doesn't have the power to impose ethics codes on the Supreme Court. Again, the obliteration of separation of powers, which is the key part of our Constitution. The key part. To eliminate broad immunity. He wants legislation to be able to overrule a Supreme Court decision. You'll notice in my proposal of years ago, I said it would take 3/4 of both houses of Congress to overrule a majority decision. Not to make a majority decision, not to impose a decision, not to replace a decision in lieu of the Supreme Court, to overrule it. But it would take a 3/4 majority. That's a super majority that can rarely be accomplished. So my point is that you really need support from the body politic. That's not what Biden's doing. Listen to this sentence. President Biden is finalizing plans to endorse major changes to the Supreme Court in the coming weeks. President Biden doesn't have the power to make major changes of an institution. Of the Supreme Court, Article 3, it is a separate branch. It goes back to Aristotle. It goes back to Locke. It goes back to Montesquieu. It goes to our founding and our constitutional convention. A president doesn't have the power to do this. A Congress doesn't have the power to do this. Just read what the men who created this government said. They say they want to cut through the 2024 election noise, get the campaign moment newsletter. He's also weighing whether to call for a constitutional amendment to eliminate broad immunity for presidents and other constitutional office holders. The announcement will mark a major shift for Biden, a former chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, who's long resisted calls to reform the high court. Look how the Washington Post talks. That Biden wants to reform the court. No, Biden wants to destroy the independence of the court and create a Marxist Islamist Democrat Party Politburo. But look how their media speak. Look how their media write. He's long resisted calls to reform the high court. Potential changes come in response to growing decisions by the new court majority that have changed legal precedent on issues including abortion and federal regulatory powers. There, they just gave it up. Ends justify the means. We must destroy the court to get the results that we want. It's not good enough that 50 states get to decide about abortion. It's not good enough that there's a massive federal bureaucracy issuing laws, undermining representative government, obviously, but he opposes the idea of judicial review. Biden previewed the shift in a Zoom call Saturday with Congressional Progressive Caucus. The Congressional Progressive Caucus is with the Marxists and the Islamists. Biden's private remarks about his high court plans came more than 2 weeks after his wobbly, confused performance at the June 27 debate. 4 days after the debate, the Supreme Court ruled Trump was immune from prosecution for official acts during his first term in office. By the way, the Supreme Court was stating existing tradition and interpretation. It didn't create anything new. Nothing. Didn't expand anything. Nothing. Less than an hour later, Biden called Lawrence Tribe. Lawrence Tribe is this feeble former Harvard Law School professor who's told Biden that he can bypass the 14th Amendment when it comes to raising the debt ceiling and basically seize Congress's power of the purse. He's told the Democrats, the media, and probably Biden that, yes, you can use the 14th Amendment, Section 4, to deny Trump ballot positions. This is the guy. And now this. And now this. The next week, Biden called Tribe again. And the two discussed a Guardian opinion piece he wrote, endorsing reforms to the Supreme Court. Among the other options, they discussed term limits, an enforceable ethics code, and the constitutional amendment to address presidential immunity. Tribe confirmed he spoke with Biden, but declined to comment about their discussion. I wonder if Tribe, and I'm not saying he is, I wonder if he's breaking federal law. It's one thing to be friendly, give a little advice now and then, but if he gives regular advice to Biden, on matters of policy, he's effectively a government employee of sorts. During the 2020 presidential race, Biden rebuffed calls from liberals who advocated expanding the court and so forth. Since he was elected, the court has veered sharply to the right. This is the Washington Post, urging the destruction of our country. Overturning Roe v. Wade. Ended affirmative action in college admissions. Listen to this. Harvard and a school in North Carolina imposed racist quotas against Asian American students. And that somehow is to be supported? The court ended it. That's to be supported. Weakening federal agencies' power by overturning a 40-year decision striking down Biden's student loan forgiveness program. All they're doing is listing all the things Biden has wanted to do that are unconstitutional. Student loan forgiveness, only Congress can do that. Biden did it. The Dobbs decision took us back to pre-Roe, which is every state can decide. We've had more abortions now since Dobbs than before, unfortunately. Student loan forgiveness, only Congress can determine forgiveness, not a president with the wagging of his crooked finger. Each of us is equal before the law. No one is above the law, not even the President of the United States, Biden said at a White House address. 8 Democratic senators have co-sponsored a bill that would establish 18-year terms for Supreme Court justices, with a new justice appointed every 2 years. The 9 most recently appointed justices would sit for appellate jurisdiction cases, while others would be able to hear original jurisdiction cases and so forth. So now they're actually going to micromanage the mechanics of the Supreme Court. Now let me ask you something. You have a party that's filled with Marxists and Islamists who hate the Constitution, who believe the nation's founding was illegitimate, and they are now going to completely rejigger the United States Supreme Court, just like they want to change the voting rules to ensure the Democrats can never lose, just like the border's wide open in violation of federal immigration laws so they can change the nature of the population in the country and increase their congressional districts. This is a party that is burning down the country. This is a massive assault on separation of powers. There are ways to bring reforms through the constitutional process. This has no intention of reforming anything. This is a massive power grab.
Mark Levin.
The Great One makes your weekend even better. This is the best of Mark Levin.
Last evening, I spent a considerable amount of time talking about how it was the Secret Service's responsibility, not local law enforcement with a very small police force, to protect outside the perimeter. And I don't know how that building became outside the perimeter for the killer to climb it, have a ladder, climb it, go to the roof, people yelling at him, and, you know. There's a lot more information, and this is actually quite frightening. And Fox has got this information from a briefing that senators just received. And let me read to you as it's breaking. The gunman who attempted to assassinate former President Trump on Saturday was identified as suspicious by law enforcement more than an hour before he opened fire. Senator John Barrasso, Republican Wyoming, told Fox News after a briefing between Senate lawmakers and the U.S. Secret Service. Barrasso said he was identified as a character of suspicion because he had a rangefinder as well as a backpack. And this was over an hour before the shooting actually occurred, so you would think over the course of that hour, You shouldn't lose sight of the individual. Somebody ought to be following up on those sorts of things. No evidence at all that happened at all. Fox News was told that Secret Service was aware of the threat before Trump walked on the stage and narrowly survived an assassinate attempt. So right there, why would they allow that to occur? You know what strikes me, Mr. Producer, and it's not about me, trust me. But it crossed my mind about 10 minutes ago. If I had stayed on the phone with him longer, none of this might have happened. It's a frightening thought. He called me. He's on the tarmac. He's in the plane. We're talking 10 minutes, 15, 12, whatever it was. And he even joked, he said, now look at how much I think of you. There's 50,000 people sitting out waiting for me, and here I am talking with you, Mark. Now, he called me to chat about a number of things. So I sit here, think about that. It's almost chilling, you know? Now, here we go. A Secret Service agent in charge of security for the event was on the phone with local and state police about the threat while the shooting took place. Barrasso said there was no talk of reports that local officers engaged with the shooter before he opened fire. They shut it after just a couple of questions and didn't get to any of the meat of the matter. He called the U.S. Secret Service Director, Kimberly Chase, to resign. The American people shouldn't feel comfortable with this, he said. This is a total failure on behalf of the Secret Service. We need a replacement at the top. And so they cut off the briefing. Senator Marsha Blackburn, Republican Tennessee, also took part in a briefing with the Secret Service and the FBI, said she was appalled to learn the Secret Service knew about a threat prior to the president walking on the stage. I mean, what the hell is going on here? I have no confidence in the leadership of Director Cheadle and believe it is in the best interest of our nation if she steps down from her position. I'm not opposed to that. Of course, fire her ass. She should step down. I mean, after all, she was a DEI Jill Biden appointee. Let's not cover anything up. Everything's on the table. But it's not just her. There was somebody in charge of protecting the President of the United States with the Secret Service at Butler, Pennsylvania. Butler Township, Pennsylvania. And as I said last night, the idea that a small police force in a town of 6,000 was told, you guys cover outside the perimeter, I just don't believe it. 1 lieutenant, 4 detectives, 12 or 14 patrol cars, 2 clerks. Are you kidding me? Nah, there's no way. And so now there's cover-up mode, and our buddy Dan Bongino will be on with me on Saturday's Life, Liberty, and Levin, former Secret Service, among other things. He's out there saying today that, well, it's even worse. Go to Right Scoop. You can see what he said. Lots to figure out here. Look, as soon as we know more, you're going to be the first to know. I am on top of all of this in the most minute detail. Nothing is passing my eyes without me taking a very close look at it and talking to people as well. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I've told you before, I read these books on totalitarianism, whether it's Marxism or the Third Reich or Soviet Union or fascism, whatever it is, by people who escaped or survived these regimes. Recently, we had one of these individuals as a guest on Life, Liberty, and Levin about North Korea. But there's always a common thread. You dehumanize your targets. We've talked about this at length. I've written about this at length. I've posted about this at length. You dehumanize your targets. Now, I want to play something for you, not to say, see, I told you so, but to say, see, I warned them to stop. I warned them to stop. Well, Mark, you can't make a connection between the two. Folks, listen to me. When you create a normal narrative that somebody is Hitler or somebody is a genocidal murderer or somebody's going to execute his political opponents, that affects the psyche of the nation and it affects the psyche of individuals. And so I have to discuss this with you. There were warnings put out about this by me. November 27, 2023. Right here on this program. Cut one go. And this man is sick. Did he say what I thought he said here, Mr. Producer? This is Scarborough. Because he will get away with, he will imprison, he will execute whoever he's allowed to imprison, execute, drive from the country. Has anyone informed Jake Tapper about this, Mr. Producer? Wolf Blitzer? The moron over at the White House press office? Has anybody even commented on this? No. One of the things I fear, America, is that Donald Trump is in grave danger because of comments like this. That he is personally and physically in grave danger because of comments like this. If you're told, and Scarborough has called him Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, I have it in my book on freedom of the press. Now he says here, and there's no twisting of words like, they attempted on me. This is flat out. He says it repeatedly. He will imprison, he will execute. Whoever he's allowed to imprison, execute, drive from the country. If you hear that from Scarborough and MSNBC, that if Donald Trump is elected, he will imprison and execute and drive from the country individuals, those are fighting words. And I cannot believe that Comcast, NBC, MSNBC allows this fool, this emotionally unstable, unhinged punk, to say the things that he says like this. And it doesn't come under any scrutiny. It's not condemned by any of his colleagues. It's not condemned by any of the other cable networks. It's not condemned at all. Again, I'm not tying this assassination attempt to him or to that. What I'm saying is you create an atmosphere, a culture, an environment where this becomes acceptable talk, acceptable language that can have an enormously devastating impact on a society. And that these people need to take responsibility for what's coming out of their mouths. And I've been calling it dehumanization because all these people who fled from these regimes or survived these regimes, that's what they said. The dehumanization of Jews. The dehumanization of people in the gulags. The dehumanization of the Uyghurs. And the dehumanization of Donald Trump. I even talked about it as recently as Monday, but here we have July 2nd, 2 days before Independence Day of this year. Of this year. How could you not? We did. How could you not see this if you're the executives at Comcast or Warner Brothers or the New York Times or the Washington Post? How can you not see this and hear this? Or the BBC? Cut two, go. One British Broadcasting Corporation presenter, COVID, seriously, took it to a whole new level, though openly encouraging Biden, ready for this, to assassinate his rival for the president. I've got to tell you something. I've told you this maybe twice before over the course of the years. I truly do fear for Donald Trump's safety. I truly do. When you step back, put the politics aside, and think about what he's been called, the lies about his threats to humanity, his threats to democracy, the comparisons to Hitler. When you think about They say he's going to kill people, lock people up. I really am worried. My wife and I talk about this a lot, about the safety of Donald Trump. From the Democrat Party and the media, starting at the top with Mr. Nowitz. Nowitz, is that an ethnic name, Mr. Producer, Mr. Nowitz? No, Mr. Nowitz. David Aaronovitch, if that is his name, who presents BBC Radio 4's Briefing Room program, had apparently clamored for the 45th president's killing online, quote, on the basis that he is a threat to America's security. See what I mean? Posting on social media, he said, if I was Biden, I would hurry up and have Trump murdered on the basis that he is a threat to America's security, sparking instant outrage online. In response, some claim the presenter's post had amounted to an open call for violence, with others suggesting people have had police visit for a lot less.
All right, that's enough. That's enough.
And I go on, of course. It is horrendous. You can see these things coming. Not the details and the specifics. This dehumanization. This is what Joe Biden does to win elections, or to win political arguments, or to defeat nominees. He dehumanized Robert Bork. He dehumanizes, even to this day, Clarence Thomas and Supreme Court justices he disagrees with. He dehumanized Reagan, but he saved the worst of it for Trump. August 30, 2022. And I've talked about this dehumanization problem now probably for 2 decades, but it really has come to a pinnacle with Joe Biden. This is his creme de la creme. He's the expert at the Leninist, Alinsky dehumanization targeting of individuals, and that's what he does.
Mark Levin.
We're giving you nothing but the best of Mark Levin.
As the days go by since the assassination attempt on President Trump, the amount of information that is being revealed, and I might add, not in a coherent or comprehensive way by the Biden regime, but by various news organizations and leaks to various news organizations and so forth, as you puzzle this together, this doesn't add up. What do you mean, Mark? What do I mean? The people at the rally saw the guy on the roof with a rifle. The people at the rally saw the guy roaming around 30 minutes before President Trump was on the stage. I'm just going by the reports and the videos. The local police were traffic cops. I explained this earlier this week, that the police department was small. They're not trained to handle a presidential event, for God's sakes. You have a counter sniper. They keep calling the gentleman a counter sniper, right? Well, what's a counter sniper? A counter sniper is a sniper that's looking for other snipers. We keep hearing that indeed local police called into whomever, we don't know, to alert them of events, of suspicions. We hear that Secret Service personnel were calling into, we don't know, to alert them that there might be an issue. Who was in charge on Saturday? Who specifically in the chain of command was in charge of protecting President Trump on that day? Who is it? Now, obviously, the director of the Secret Service has demonstrated herself to be a complete incompetent. And I noticed the media have stopped talking about her being an appointee pushed by Joe Biden. And I noticed they stopped talking about the fact that she was pushing for 30% women Secret Service agents. You don't push for Secret Service agents based on their genitalia, or for that matter, anywhere in law enforcement or the military. But that aside for now. The excuse is a sloped roof? I mean, we're an advanced country. The most technologically advanced country on the face of the earth. We can't get a simple answer? The Biden administration is stonewalling us. They're going to have an independent investigation. We don't need an independent investigation. We need answers right now. Who was in charge? Release every piece of information you have right now. Release all the audio. Release all the video. Right now. It's amazing that the Biden administration was in a rush, a hurry, to prosecute Donald Trump, the DA in Georgia, the DA in Manhattan. We got to get a conviction. We got to get a conviction. Are you seeing the same vigor as you saw with these prosecutions? You're not. You're not. There's been talk, reports at least, that the B team, the C team, in addition to some from the A team, were protecting President Trump. Well, is it true or not? There have been reports that the amount of resources applied to protecting Trump were not adequate. Then there's a report that we just learned from a week ago that the Islamo-Nazi regime in Iran has a hit out on our president, President Trump. Meanwhile, a 20-year-old climbs a wall, goes to the top of a building, in sight of the Secret Service snipers, in sight of the audience, and pops off a bunch of bullets. Let's assume for a moment that it was utter incompetence. Let's just assume that for a moment. Utter incompetence. In the Secret Service, at the highest levels. In an area like this, the protection of a presidential candidate, why is it that we rely on the federal government for our health care? Why is it that we rely on the federal government for supporting public education? Why is it that we rely on the federal government for all aspects of our life, that we want to give them more power, more money, more authority? They're already ubiquitous in our culture and our society, but more and more and more centralization of authority. And what happens, ladies and gentlemen, when you have more and more centralization of authority, you have more and more incompetence. The government wants to take over everything, but it can't run anything. The border's wide open, and it's the federal government's responsibility to secure it. Our military's under-supported, underfinanced, and yet clearly that's a federal government responsibility. Ensuring that the currency that the government provides, the currency that has the full faith and credit of the United States government behind it, isn't devalued by inflation and massive spending. Well, obviously, it is. And so they can't even do that right. I mean, the Democrat Party doesn't even know how to nominate a presidential candidate. And we give them more and more power. No. This is clearly a responsibility not of local police, of the Secret Service, of the federal government. This Department of Homeland Security needs to be broken up. You want to know why? Because we don't have Homeland Security with the Department of Homeland Security. We don't have secure borders. And obviously, the Secret Service under the Department of Homeland Security failed Donald Trump. That's the way it is. No more. I'm not talking about the little guy. I'm not talking about the big guy. I'm talking about the entire entity until we figure out what the hell's going on here. And then, the same media that has spent years dehumanizing Donald Trump, the same Biden administration that has spent years dehumanizing Donald Trump, dehumanizing Trump supporters, the same party is now spewing the most contemptible, unconscionable conspiracy theories imaginable. Michael Steele, Joy Reid, and a dozen others. Less than a week after the assassination attempt. Less than a week. Did he get stitches? Where's the pictures? Where's the medical reports? Joy Reid with her posts and her comments. And then, of course, they're very concerned that too many Americans will have sympathy for the former president, that they might say, you know what? Enough is enough. I'm going to vote for him. No, we can't have that. We can't have that. And then it's Donald Trump's fault and his supporters' fault for contributing to the violent language in this republic. I want to play something for you from April 1st, 2023. And I found this, Mr. Producer, because it was put out by Media Matters. You remember that? Media Matters attacked me. This is a Soros front group for saying what I said well over a year ago. And this is what I said. Cut 22, go.
The media, Democrats, and the Democrat Party and so forth, they've attempted to turn Donald Trump into a non-human. In fact, they've attempted to turn you into non-humans. You hear it all the time. You and I are responsible for insurrections. You and I are responsible for racism in a white-dominant society. You and I just won't relent to accepting redistribution of wealth, massive increases in taxes, a bloated centralized government, equity over equality, transgendering our children, critical race theory. We just are standing in the way of progress. And Donald Trump is standing in the way of progress, too. They've rounded up so far 1,000 people from January 6th, all of whom now have the scarlet letter of some kind of criminal plea agreement or prosecution that they will wear on their foreheads for the rest of their life. The U.S. Attorney in Washington, D.C., who has refused to prosecute almost 70% of the criminals who've been brought to him by the local police chief in the police department, because in D.C. it's the U.S. Attorney who does those prosecutions, has said there's at least 1,000 more people they intend to round up. This is intended as an intimidation tactic, just as arresting and prosecuting people who protest in front of abortion clinics. And yet we learned the other day that from on high, the Attorney General and the other reprobates at the Department of Justice, that the U.S. Marshals were basically told not to arrest and apprehend individuals who were intimidating Supreme Court justices after the Dobbs decision. People like to say there's two systems of justice. If you don't have one system of justice, there's no system of justice. Period. There's no system of justice. And that's the problem. When you lose the law, you lose your country. The Constitution doesn't matter. The criminal code is used against your opponents. It's politicized. You have the growth of a police state. That's exactly what's happening in this country. There is simply no question about it. And we know who's taken us down this road. It is the Democrat Party and their media.
Why do the media call Trump Hitler? Why did Joe Biden have that speech at Independence Hall? With exquisite detail in the lighting to make it seem so thoroughly ominous. Why was the core of their campaign to accuse Donald Trump of wanting to be a dictator, to accuse Donald Trump of wanting to destroy democracy? He was president for 4 years. He wasn't a dictator. He didn't destroy democracy. He challenged an election. You're allowed to challenge an election. He didn't tell those people to go riot like Maxine Waters has done and other Democrats have done. No, he told them to peacefully talk to their representatives. He offered 10,000 National Guardsmen. But it doesn't fit into the narrative. What the Democrats and the media have said, and by the way, the Never-Trumpers have said about Donald Trump, is reprehensible. What they've said about you, tens of millions of Americans, MAGA, make America great again. Yeah, that's so offensive. They spew Marx. They spew Lenin. They spew all the hate of the Marxist, Islamist left. Their supporters are in the street talking about the extermination of the Jews. We had cities burning in 2020. We were told they're peaceful protests. But it's MAGA. And yet, as Judge Janine so brilliantly put it the other day, Donald Trump was almost assassinated and you didn't see any riots by any Trump supporters anywhere on the planet.